When my neighbor Brenda called the cops on my 16-year-old son for cyber terrorism because he changed our own Wi-Fi password, I thought we'd hit peak HOA crazy. Boy, was I wrong. Picture this: 3 patrol cars, red and blue lights bouncing off every vinyl-sided house on Maple Street, and my kid Dexter standing there in his pajamas holding a laptop like it's some kind of weapon of mass destruction. The smell of burnt coffee from the officers' thermoses mixed with the crisp autumn air as they tried to figure out why they'd been called to arrest a teenager for naming his internet connection. But here's the thing. What we discovered in Brenda's basement 3 weeks later would land her in federal prison, expose a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise, and turn our quiet suburban nightmare into the most satisfying justice story you'll hear all year. Drop a comment. What's the craziest thing your HOA has ever done to you? Also, where are you watching from? I want to see how far this madness spreads. Let me back up and paint you the picture of how a single dad and his coding genius son accidentally declared war on a criminal mastermind disguised as a suburban HOA president. My name's Marcus Pellegrino, and 3 years ago I made the classic divorced dad mistake. I thought a quiet neighborhood would solve all my problems. After my ex-wife cleaned out our savings and ran off with her CrossFit trainer, I needed a fresh start for me and my 16-year-old son Dexter. Maplewood Estates looked like suburban paradise. Modest ranch houses, perfectly trimmed lawns that smelled like fresh-cut grass and gasoline from weekend mowing sessions, and an HOA fee of just $200 a month. The realtor assured me the HOA president, Brenda Thornfield, was a detail-oriented former bank manager who really cared about the community. First red flag: anyone who describes themselves as detail-oriented is usually code for "will make your life a living hell over mailbox paint colors." Dexter's the kind of kid who builds gaming computers from YouTube tutorials and got accepted to MIT's summer coding camp, which has a lower acceptance rate than med school. He's also got that teenager sense of humor where naming our Wi-Fi Pretty Fly for a Wi-Fi counts as peak comedy. For the first year, Brenda seemed normal. She'd cruise by in her spotless white Lexus, wave from behind designer sunglasses, maybe mention that my grass was getting adventurous. Standard HOA small talk. My elderly neighbors, the Kowalskis, survivors of actual Nazi occupation, would laugh that American bureaucrats were kindergarten bullies compared to real tyrants. Then 2021 happened, and Brenda got elected HOA president unopposed. Within 30 days, our mailbox started choking on violation notices like a broken slot machine spitting out losing tickets. My work van in my own driveway? Commercial vehicle violation, $500 fine. The basketball hoop Dexter had saved up to buy? Unapproved recreational structure, $500 fine. The tiny herb garden my ex had planted before abandoning us? Non-conforming landscaping, disrupting neighborhood aesthetic harmony, $500 fine. I'm talking about a house I bled for, working double shifts until my hands cramped around electrical wire and my back screamed from crawling through attics in 100-degree heat. The metallic taste of exhaustion and the burn of sawdust in my throat. That's what buying this place cost me. But the breaking point came via certified mail, delivered with that satisfying thunk of the mailman's boots on my porch steps. Brenda's letter, typed on official HOA letterhead that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, demanded I immediately cease and desist from broadcasting offensive digital communications that violate community standards of decency and patriotic respect. She was talking about our Wi-Fi name. Dexter had upgraded our entire house with a mesh network, kid's a technical wizard, and named it FBI Surveillance Van Number 3 as a harmless joke. The kind of thing that makes neighbors chuckle when they're scrolling through available connections. Brenda saw it as a declaration of war against her authority. I crumpled that letter and slam-dunked it into the kitchen trash where it belonged. This is America, last time I checked. My house, my internet, my right to name my Wi-Fi whatever makes my teenager laugh. That's when Brenda showed her true colors. She dug up some ancient city ordinance about electronic harassment, probably written when dial-up modems sounded like robots having seizures, and filed an official complaint with the sheriff's department. She actually claimed our Wi-Fi name was a terrorist communication device causing psychological distress to patriotic citizens. Sheriff Deputy Rodriguez arrived looking like he'd rather be investigating actual crimes. The poor guy had to explain with a completely straight face, that he'd been dispatched to investigate a cyber terrorism complaint against a teenager's internet joke. The absurdity hung in the air like the smell of ozone before a thunderstorm. But here's what I didn't know yet, what none of us knew. That Wi-Fi complaint wasn't about community standards or wounded pride. It was cover for something bigger, darker, and worth millions of dollars. Brenda Thornfield wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president. She was a criminal mastermind, and my family had just painted a target on our backs. Brenda's declaration of war came exactly 72 hours after Deputy Rodriguez left our driveway. She called an emergency HOA board meeting with 6 hours' notice, the kind of corporate ambush that would make a hostile takeover specialist proud. I showed up anyway, because in my family, we don't back down from bullies. The community center reeked of stale coffee and industrial carpet cleaner that burned your sinuses like bleach. Brenda sat at the head table wearing a navy blazer that screamed, "I demand to speak to your manager," flanked by 3 nodding sycophants who probably practiced synchronized agreement in their spare time. "We're addressing a clear and present danger to our community's digital security," she announced, voice dripping with the kind of manufactured authority that makes dictators everywhere take notes. She actually said clear and present danger about my kid's Wi-Fi joke. Within 20 minutes, they'd rammed through the Digital Harmony Resolution, a legal document that gave the HOA power to monitor and regulate any wireless networks in the neighborhood. Offensive names meant $100 daily fines. They could even contact internet providers to disconnect problematic connections. The vote? 4-1. Mrs. Patterson only voted no because she thought Wi-Fi was a type of houseplant. When I challenged the vote, citing what I remembered from our HOA bylaws about requiring 48-hour notice for meetings, Brenda's smile could have cut glass. The sheriff's terrorism complaint makes this a public safety emergency exempt from normal procedures. The woman had orchestrated this entire legal trap from the moment she filed that first complaint. But here's the thing about electricians. We troubleshoot problems for a living. That night, I dissected our HOA documents like I was hunting a short circuit. Turns out my grandfather's advice about reading the fine print was right again. Emergency meetings can only bypass notice requirements for genuine emergencies like natural disasters or imminent physical danger. Hurt feelings about internet names don't qualify under any legitimate interpretation of the law. I filed a formal challenge with the state attorney general's office before my morning coffee got cold. Dexter had his own response to Brenda's power grab. He changed our Wi-Fi to Brenda drinks box wine alone, and grinned like he'd just discovered fire. The neighborhood explosion was beautiful. Within 48 hours, new networks bloomed like digital wildflowers. HOA Karen Detection Network, Brenda Needs Therapy, and my personal favorite from the Kowalskis, Survived Nazis Can Handle Karen. Brenda's counterattack was swift and vicious. She hired a private investigator, some bottom feeder in a wrinkled suit whose beat-up sedan leaked oil puddles on our pristine suburban asphalt. The guy reeked of cigarettes and failure, following me to job sites like a lost puppy with trust issues. Then came the daily harassment blitzkrieg. Noise complaints about Dexter's gaming setup at 2 p.m. on Saturday. Citations for unauthorized vehicle maintenance when I checked my tire pressure. A formal complaint claiming I ran an unlicensed electrical business because I'd helped my neighbor fix a broken outlet. You know, basic human decency. But Brenda made a crucial error. She got greedy and desperate, which is when criminals always make their biggest mistakes. My security cameras, basic wireless units I'd installed after the stalking started, caught her red-handed at 11:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. Crystal clear footage of HOA President Brenda Thornfield crouched behind my house with a flashlight and what looked suspiciously like lock-picking tools, trying to break into my electrical meter box. The next morning, I printed that footage in glorious 8x10 color and knocked on her door. She answered in a silk robe that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Conducting routine HOA electrical safety inspections," she said without missing a beat. "Your professional background makes you high risk for code violations." At 11 p.m., with lockpicks, the community deserves thorough protection. That's when I realized this woman was either completely delusional or playing a game with rules I didn't understand yet. But I had my own cards to play. I handed her the photos and smiled. "Funny thing about being an electrician, Brenda, I know exactly what criminal trespassing and attempted breaking and entering look like. I also know that security footage with timestamps makes excellent evidence in court." Her face went white as her precious Lexus. "You can't prove anything." Already sent copies to the sheriff's office and my attorney. Oh, and Dexter uploaded the video to his blog. Kid's got quite the following among HOA abuse victims nationwide. These things have a funny way of going viral when they show HOA presidents committing actual crimes. For the first time since this nightmare started, Brenda Thornfield looked genuinely afraid. Not angry, not indignant, afraid. Her perfectly manicured hands actually trembled as she closed the door without another word. But here's what really bothered me about that security footage. She wasn't randomly trying to break into my meter. She knew exactly where to look, like she had blueprints or had been there before. She was searching for something specific near our foundation, something she expected to find. How does an HOA president know the exact layout of your property's electrical system? And what was she really looking for in the dark? Brenda's retaliation came like a Category 5 hurricane hitting a trailer park, swift, devastating, and surgically designed to destroy everything I'd spent years building. Within 48 hours of our doorstep confrontation, she'd filed a complaint with the State Electrical Licensing Board, claiming I was performing unlicensed electrical work on residential properties. The bitter irony could choke you. She was accusing a licensed union electrician of being unlicensed. But bureaucrats investigate first and ask questions later, so suddenly I had state inspectors crawling through my job sites like ants at a picnic. Then Brenda got creative with economic warfare. She started calling every business where my company had contracts, spinning elaborate stories about safety concerns and ongoing criminal investigations. The acrid smell of burnt coffee and desperation hung in the air during my emergency meeting with Henderson Construction, where I'd worked steady contracts for 3 years. "Marcus, you're solid people, but this woman's called my office 6 times this week," Mr. Henderson said, loosening his tie like it was strangling him. "Claims you're under investigation for fraud, safety violations, insurance fraud, the whole 9 yards. My liability carrier's threatening to drop me if I keep using contractors with pending legal issues." That's when the scope of Brenda's operation hit me like a live wire. This wasn't random harassment. She understood exactly which pressure points would cause maximum financial damage. Someone with this level of business savvy had definitely done this before. Dexter, meanwhile, had transformed our house into a digital evidence fortress. Watching my 16-year-old work was like seeing a master pianist perform. Every keystroke deliberate, every backup system elegant. He'd created what he called a documentation ecosystem that automatically captured screenshots, recordings, and timestamps of every Brenda interaction, all stored on cloud servers she couldn't access or destroy. But her nuclear option came through Jefferson High School. Brenda called the principal, claiming Dexter was cyberbullying community members through his Wi-Fi names and blog posts about HOA abuse. Mrs. Davidson summoned me for an emergency conference with that carefully neutral administrator tone that usually means your kid's in serious trouble. I left a job site mid-installation, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went bone white. The principal's office fluorescent lights buzzed like angry wasps, and Mrs. Davidson wore that expression of someone who'd already reached a verdict before hearing evidence. But here's where Brenda's plan backfired spectacularly. After I explained the situation and showed Mrs. Davidson Dexter's blog documenting legitimate community issues, her entire demeanor shifted. "Mr. Pellegrino, I live in Willowbrook Estates. Different HOA, same problems. Your son isn't cyberbullying anyone. He's documenting abuse and exercising constitutional rights. If anything, he's performing a public service." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "Between us, I'd love to see someone take down these petty dictators." That's when I decided to bring in professional reinforcements. I called Jenny Vasquez, Channel 7's investigative reporter who specialized in consumer protection stories. Jenny had built a career destroying corporate bullies and corrupt officials, exactly what we needed. Jenny arrived at our house the next evening in a news van that made Brenda's surveillance look like amateur hour. She was sharp as a surgical scalpel, with the kind of predatory smile that probably made corrupt politicians check their life insurance policies. "Marcus, I've been covering HOA abuse for 15 years. This Brenda character sounds eerily familiar, like déjà vu familiar. Mind if I dig into her background?" 1 week later, Jenny spread her research across my kitchen table like she was planning a military invasion. The pattern she'd uncovered made my electrician's blood run cold. "Brenda's been HOA president in 2 previous neighborhoods over the past decade. Same playbook every time. systematically target vulnerable residents with harassment campaigns until they're forced to sell below market value. Single parents, elderly folks, minorities, anyone who can't fight back effectively. But here's the kicker that turned this from harassment into criminal conspiracy. In both previous neighborhoods, Brenda had somehow ended up buying the distressed properties through shell companies, then flipping them for massive profits or holding them for development deals. She's already acquired 3 foreclosed homes in your neighborhood using the same tactics, Jenny continued, pointing to property records that told the whole ugly story. This isn't community management, Marcus. This is systematic real estate fraud disguised as HOA enforcement. That night, lying awake listening to the whisper of wind through our bedroom windows, everything clicked into place. We weren't annoying neighbors to Brenda. We were her next acquisition targets. The harassment, the property knowledge, the determination to drive us out, it was all part of a calculated business plan. But understanding her criminal enterprise meant I could finally fight back strategically. If Brenda wanted to play real estate predator, she was about to discover that this union electrician knew how to cause some serious short circuits in her operation. The question keeping me awake, how many other families had she destroyed, and who else was helping her run this scheme? Brenda's desperation reached psychotic levels when she decided to destroy the most precious thing in my life, my relationship with my son. The Child Protective Services complaint she filed was so vicious, so calculated to cause maximum emotional damage, that I knew we were dealing with someone who'd completely lost touch with human decency. Mr. Pellegrino, we've received serious allegations of child endangerment, the CPS caseworker announced, standing on my doorstep with that official clipboard that strikes fear into every parent's heart. Claims include exposing your minor son to dangerous hacking activities, providing unrestricted internet access for criminal purposes, and failing to supervise potentially illegal cyber terrorism. The morning air carried the scent of freshly cut grass mixed with the caseworker's drugstore perfume, creating this surreal normalcy, while my world threatened to collapse. She spent 2 hours inspecting our home, Dexter's organized room with coding textbooks and perfectly maintained computer equipment, our clean kitchen, the family photos showing a normal father-son relationship. Ma'am, with respect, this complaint appears to be completely fabricated, the caseworker finally said, shaking her head in disgust. Your son is clearly brilliant, well cared for, and engaged in legitimate educational activities. Filing false CPS reports is a felony, and whoever made this complaint should be prosecuted. But Brenda wasn't finished trying to destroy my life. Through her banking connections from her previous career, she manipulated my business loan into early termination. The call came at 6 a.m., jolting me from the first decent sleep I'd had in weeks. Mr. Pellegrino, First National Bank is exercising our right to call your business loan due to material changes in your risk profile. You have 72 hours to pay the full balance of $47,000. I sat in that sterile bank conference room later that morning, breathing in the smell of industrial carpet cleaner and watching some 20-something loan officer shuffle papers like he was handling radioactive material. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead while he explained that community complaints and pending investigations made me a liability. That night, I came closer to giving up than I'd ever been. The weight of this battle felt heavier than the 400-amp electrical panels I'd installed in summer heat that could melt asphalt. Maybe Brenda was right. Maybe I should just disappear and let her win. But Dexter had other plans. Dad, you know what happens when bullies win? They find new victims. We're not just fighting for us anymore, we're fighting for everyone she's going to target next. That's when the miracle happened. Dexter's blog documenting our fight had exploded across social media, drawing attention from HOA abuse advocacy groups nationwide. The comments section became a support network of families sharing their own nightmare stories. More importantly, a legal defense fund that started at zero hit $23,000 within 48 hours of going viral. The National Association of Home Builders contacted me directly. Brenda's systematic fraud was damaging legitimate construction businesses across multiple states, and they offered to fund our legal battle as part of a broader investigation into HOA corruption schemes. But Brenda's response to losing control was where she made her fatal mistake. Desperate to silence Dexter's blog, she attempted to hack into his servers from her home computer at 3:17 a.m. on a Wednesday. Big mistake. Attacking a teenage coding prodigy on his own digital turf was like bringing a knife to a gunfight. Dexter didn't just block her cyber attack, he counter-hacked her entire home network in real time, documenting every attempt she made to delete evidence, plant viruses, and access his personal accounts. The kid turned her own computer into a confessional booth, recording her increasingly panicked phone calls as she realized she'd been caught red-handed committing federal cybercrimes. "Dad, you need to hear this," Dexter said, playing back audio he'd captured from her security breach attempt. Brenda was on the phone with someone, speaking in broken Russian about liquidating assets and evacuation protocols, and something about the basement operation being compromised. Russian, money laundering, basement operations. Suddenly, everything clicked into place like the final piece of a deadly puzzle. Jenny Vasquez arrived at our house within an hour, carrying a briefcase full of FBI surveillance photos that made my electrician's blood run cold. The images showed Brenda meeting with known organized crime figures at various locations around the city. "Marcus, your son didn't just annoy a power-hungry HOA president," Jenny explained, spreading the evidence across our kitchen table. "He accidentally exposed an international money laundering operation using neighborhood infrastructure to wash millions in criminal proceeds. The real estate fraud was just cover for something much bigger." That explained her obsession with our basement, her detailed knowledge of the electrical systems, her desperate attempts to access areas near our foundation. She wasn't trying to steal our house. She was protecting a criminal enterprise that depended on underground access routes we didn't even know existed. The question that kept me staring at the ceiling that night: if we'd stumbled into an international conspiracy, how many other neighbors were involved, and what would they do to protect their operation? The full scope of Brenda's criminal empire revealed itself through the most mundane discovery imaginable: a city permit application that Dexter found while cross-referencing property records at 2 a.m. "Dad, wake up, you need to see this," he whispered, shaking me from the first decent sleep I'd had in weeks. His laptop screen glowed in our dark bedroom, displaying a 1987 city permit for basement structural modifications at Brenda's address. The permit description was innocuous enough: foundation reinforcement and utility access improvements. But when Dexter overlaid it with historical city planning maps, the truth hit us like a sledgehammer to the chest. Our entire neighborhood sat on top of a network of Prohibition-era tunnels, originally built in the 1920s to transport illegal alcohol from hidden speakeasies to the old railway depot. The tunnels had been sealed and forgotten for decades, but Brenda's structural modifications had reopened them, creating a hidden highway system running directly under our houses. "Look at this, Dad," Dexter said, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he pulled up thermal imaging data from the city's infrastructure database. "There's a tunnel running from her basement, under the Kowalski's house, directly to the foundation of our property. That's why she knew exactly where our electrical meter was. She's been accessing our basement through the tunnel system." The basement she'd been so desperate to search wasn't random. It was a critical junction point in her underground network, and our house was blocking her access to the main artery leading to the old railway station, which was now the downtown financial district. But the tunnels weren't just for real estate fraud. Jenny Vasquez's FBI contacts had been tracking cryptocurrency mining operations that were draining massive amounts of electricity from residential neighborhoods across 3 states. The power theft was so sophisticated that it appeared to be distributed across hundreds of homes, making it nearly impossible to detect. Until now. Brenda had been using the tunnel network to tap directly into neighborhood electrical grids, running massive server farms in the hidden underground spaces while residents' power bills skyrocketed, and no one could figure out why. "Marcus, this is bigger than we thought," Jenny said over the phone, her voice tight with excitement and fear. "The FBI's cryptocurrency task force has been hunting this operation for 2 years. They've traced over $50 million in transactions to servers hidden in residential neighborhoods, but they could never find the physical location." The scope was staggering. Brenda wasn't just stealing electricity, she was hosting illegal servers for dark web marketplaces, money laundering operations, and cryptocurrency mining farms that generated millions in untraceable digital currency. The HOA violations and property acquisitions were cover operations designed to control access points and eliminate witnesses. Every family she'd driven out of the neighborhood had been living directly above critical infrastructure for her criminal network. The harassment campaigns weren't random targeting. They were strategic removals of security threats. "She's been planning this for years," Dexter said, pulling up property purchase records that showed a clear pattern. "Every house she bought through foreclosure sits on a tunnel junction. She needed to control the access points to protect the operation." That's when the final piece fell into place. The Russian phone calls, the international money laundering connections, the desperate attempts to access our basement. Brenda wasn't the mastermind. She was middle management in a much larger criminal organization, and our house sat on top of their most valuable asset. The cryptocurrency servers hidden in our neighborhood's underground tunnels were generating millions in untraceable income for organized crime syndicates. Our Wi-Fi joke hadn't just annoyed a petty HOA president. It had threatened to expose an international criminal conspiracy worth more money than most small countries' GDP. But now that we knew the truth, the real question became, how do you fight an enemy with unlimited resources, international connections, and absolutely nothing left to lose? The war room we assembled in my kitchen looked like something out of a spy thriller. FBI surveillance photos, tunnel blueprints, cryptocurrency transaction records, and enough legal documents to choke a horse. The smell of strong coffee mixed with the metallic scent of fear as we planned our counterattack against an international criminal organization. Jenny Vasquez had brought in the heavy artillery. Federal prosecutors from the Organized Crime Task Force, state attorney general investigators focusing on HOA fraud, civil rights attorneys targeting discriminatory harassment, and environmental lawyers concerned about the fire hazards from illegal electrical modifications. It was like assembling the Justice League, if superheroes wore cheap suits and carried briefcases full of subpoenas. "Here's what we're dealing with," said Agent Sarah Olivia from the FBI's Cryptocurrency Crimes Unit, spreading thermal imaging photos across my kitchen table. Conservative estimate puts this operation at generating 15 to 20 million annually in untraceable cryptocurrency. The tunnel system extends under 47 properties across 3 residential developments. Dexter had become our secret weapon in ways I never imagined. The kid had created a comprehensive digital forensics package that made federal investigators look like amateurs. Every HOA violation, every harassment incident, every suspicious property transaction, all cross-referenced with electrical usage spikes, cryptocurrency blockchain analysis, and tunnel access points. The beauty of their system was its distributed nature, Dexter explained to the assembled team, sounding more like a federal prosecutor than a 16-year-old. By spreading the power theft across dozens of homes, individual increases looked normal, but when you map the usage patterns against tunnel locations, the theft becomes obvious. The legal team had their own arsenal of weapons. Federal RICO laws applied because the criminal enterprise affected interstate commerce through cryptocurrency transactions. Every dollar Brenda had stolen from HOA funds constituted embezzlement under state fiduciary laws. The utility theft exceeded federal wire fraud thresholds. Most satisfying of all, her false CPS reports carried mandatory minimum sentences in our state. But Agent Olivia delivered the strategy that would bring down the entire operation. We're going to let them think they've won while we document everything. Mr. Pellegrino, we need you to appear defeated, maybe even consider moving away. Meanwhile, we'll be recording every criminal act they commit trying to secure their operation. The sting operation would be elegant in its simplicity. I'd wear a wire during any negotiation meetings, Brenda requested. Dexter's security cameras would capture evidence of continued trespassing and intimidation. Most importantly, federal agents would monitor the tunnel system to document the full scope of the criminal enterprise. Meanwhile, the community mobilization was beautiful to watch. The Maplewood Residents Coalition had grown to 63 families, each with their own evidence of Brenda's systematic harassment. Mrs. Patterson, who'd voted against the Wi-Fi resolution because she thought it was about houseplants, turned out to have been documenting every suspicious HOA expenditure for 3 years. I knew something was wrong when they charged us $2,000 to trim bushes that cost maybe $300, she said, pulling out meticulously organized receipts and bank statements. But I'm 78 years old. Who was going to believe me? The recall petition to remove the entire corrupted HOA board had collected over 200 signatures. More importantly, the class action lawsuit for fund misappropriation would freeze all HOA assets until the investigation concluded. Dexter's technical mastery reached new levels as he prepared our digital defense systems. He'd created untraceable backups of all evidence on distributed servers across multiple countries. Any attempt to destroy our documentation would be futile. The information existed in too many places to eliminate. But his masterpiece was the neighborhood mesh network he'd developed. Every participating household now had free, secure internet that automatically documented and reported any suspicious electrical usage, network intrusions, or physical surveillance attempts. It was like turning the entire community into a digital fortress. The emotional preparation was equally important. Months of harassment had taken their toll on both of us, and the therapist recommended by the victim advocacy group helped us process the trauma while maintaining focus on justice. These sessions taught me that what we'd endured wasn't just personal harassment, it was systematic psychological warfare designed to break our spirits. Resource gathering had exceeded our wildest expectations. The legal defense fund had reached $73,000 from donors nationwide. Pro bono technical support came from major cybersecurity firms who wanted to study Brenda's operation for research purposes. My electrical union provided expert witnesses for the utility theft prosecution. Real estate attorneys volunteered to handle property rights violations. But the most powerful weapon in our arsenal was something Brenda had never expected: community solidarity. Every family she'd targeted, every neighbor she'd intimidated, every resident who'd suffered under her regime was now united in bringing her down. The plan was set, this evidence was documented, the legal team was assembled, the federal agents were positioned. Now came the hard part: convincing a desperate criminal organization that we were defeated while secretly recording every crime they committed, trying to finish us off. Game time. Brenda's desperation reached full-blown panic mode when she discovered the federal investigation through what we later learned was a corrupt city planning official on her payroll. Her response was swift, vicious, and exactly the kind of criminal behavior we needed her to commit on camera. The frame-up attempt was so clumsy it would have been funny if it wasn't trying to destroy my life. At 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, someone broke into my work truck parked in our driveway and planted evidence that would make a DEA agent salivate. Hard drives containing what appeared to be cryptocurrency mining software, detailed electrical schematics of the neighborhood's power grid, and financial records showing suspicious transactions. The anonymous tip to police came 6 hours later. Concerned citizen reported suspicious activity at the Pellegrino residence, suggesting they check my vehicle for evidence of the neighborhood's electrical theft problems. When Detective Martinez arrived with a search warrant, the morning air still carried the metallic scent of dew on my truck's hood and the lingering smell of whoever had been smoking cheap cigarettes during their evidence-planting mission. I handed over my keys with a smile that probably looked suspicious but was actually relief. We'd been expecting this move. "Mr. Pellegrino, we found some concerning materials in your vehicle," Detective Martinez said, holding up evidence bags containing the planted hard drives. "We're going to need you to come downtown for questioning." That's when Brenda made her fatal mistake. She showed up at the arrest scene. Not as a concerned neighbor watching police activity, she arrived before the detective had even finished reading my rights, positioned herself perfectly to see the evidence being removed from my truck, and had her phone out recording everything like she was documenting her victory. "I knew he was behind the electrical theft," she announced loudly enough for our security cameras to capture every word. "Those computer drives probably contain all the evidence of his criminal enterprise." The problem? We hadn't told anyone about the planted drives yet. The only way Brenda could know what evidence would be found was if she'd put it there herself. Agent Olivia later told me that watching Brenda incriminate herself on federal surveillance footage was like watching a masterclass in how not to commit crimes. Within 4 hours, FBI cyber forensics had traced the planted hard drives back to Brenda's own computer network, proving the evidence came from her personal devices. But Brenda wasn't finished digging her own grave. When the planted evidence scheme collapsed, she escalated to direct threats against federal agents. Agent Olivia received an anonymous call warning her to stop harassing innocent community leaders and suggesting that accidents happen to investigators who don't know when to quit. The call came from Brenda's home phone. She'd apparently forgotten that federal agents have caller ID. Meanwhile, the neighborhood descended into siege warfare. Brenda hired private security guards, sketchy guys in unmarked cars who positioned themselves at every entrance to our development. They carried cameras, followed residents to work, and made it clear that anyone cooperating with outside agitators would face consequences. The intimidation tactics backfired spectacularly. Instead of scaring people into silence, Brenda's private army galvanized community resistance. The Kowalskis, who'd survived actual Nazi occupation, were particularly unimpressed by suburban fascism. "These American bullies are kindergarten children compared to real tyranny," Mrs. Kowalski announced at an emergency residence meeting. We did not escape Poland to be terrorized by HOA criminals in our own neighborhood. That's when we discovered the extent of Brenda's underground network. Literally. Dexter's motion sensors throughout the tunnel system detected unprecedented activity. Multiple people were moving through the hidden passages at all hours, carrying equipment and apparently preparing for some kind of major operation. "Dad, they're not just mining cryptocurrency down there anymore," Dexter said, analyzing thermal imaging data that made my blood run cold. "The heat signatures suggest they're setting up something much bigger. industrial-level equipment that's generating serious electrical loads. Agent Olivia's response was immediate and terrifying. We need to evacuate the neighborhood. If they're setting up large-scale server farms or manufacturing operations in unstable tunnels under residential properties, we're looking at potential catastrophic infrastructure collapse. But evacuation would give Brenda exactly what she wanted: empty houses and no witnesses to whatever final operation she was planning. The federal task force faced an impossible choice: protect residents by evacuating or catch criminals by using us as bait. That's when Brenda made her most desperate move yet. Unable to frame me, intimidate federal agents, or scare the community into submission, she decided to eliminate the problem at its source. The arson attempt on our house was captured by 6 different security cameras from multiple angles, showing Brenda personally attempting to start an electrical fire that would have killed me and Dexter in our sleep. Only Dexter's smart home fire suppression system and the quick response of our volunteer firefighter neighbor prevented murder by arson. But now we had federal attempted murder charges to add to Brenda's growing list of felonies. The gloves were off. Brenda had crossed the line from white-collar crime to violent felonies, and federal law enforcement was done playing games. Brenda's final act of desperation transformed our quiet suburban street into something resembling a war zone. When the arson attempt failed and federal murder charges became inevitable, she barricaded herself inside her mansion with enough weapons to outfit a small militia and enough paranoia to fuel a conspiracy theory convention. The SWAT team evacuation began at dawn with armored vehicles rumbling down Maple Street like mechanical thunder. The acrid smell of diesel exhaust mixed with the morning dew as tactical officers went door to door, moving families to safety, while Brenda screamed threats through her security system's loudspeakers. "This is federal government tyranny." Her voice echoed across our lawns, distorted by cheap speakers into something resembling a deranged robot. "Marcus Pellegrino is a deep state operative sent to destroy patriotic Americans who believe in property rights." The irony was rich enough to choke on. A woman who'd spent months filing false government complaints was now claiming government persecution. But not everyone evacuated willingly. The Kowalskis flatly refused to leave their home, despite tactical officers explaining the danger. "We survived Nazi bombardment in Warsaw," Mr. Kowalski announced from his front porch, wearing his best suit like he was attending church. "We will not be intimidated by suburban fascists with temper tantrums." Their stubborn courage inspired other longtime residents to resist evacuation, creating a logistical nightmare for law enforcement trying to secure the area. Mailman Pete became an unofficial community coordinator, using his route knowledge to help residents retrieve medications and pets from the danger zone. Meanwhile, Dexter had transformed our temporary command post at the fire station into a high-tech intelligence center. His thermal imaging surveillance of the tunnel network revealed activity that made federal agents recalculate everything they thought they knew about Brenda's operation. "Dad, this isn't just cryptocurrency mining," he said, pointing to heat signatures that looked like industrial manufacturing equipment. "They've got server farms down there generating enough electrical load to power a small city, but there's something else. Chemical signatures that suggest they're not just laundering digital money." Agent Olivia's face went pale when she saw Dexter's analysis. The thermal patterns indicated drug manufacturing equipment, specifically synthetic opioid production on an industrial scale. Brenda's HOA harassment had been cover for a multi-million-dollar drug operation disguised as cryptocurrency mining. "We're not dealing with financial crimes anymore," Agent Olivia announced to the assembled task force. "This is narcotics trafficking with international distribution networks. The tunnels aren't just hiding servers, they're concealing a drug manufacturing pipeline." That's when Brenda's psychology completely collapsed, realizing federal agents were mapping her underground drug operation. She took her housekeeper, Rosa Martinez, hostage, a woman who'd been essentially imprisoned in the mansion for months, afraid to contact authorities because of her undocumented status. The hostage situation revealed the full scope of Brenda's cruelty. Rosa had been forced to help maintain the criminal operation, cooking and cleaning for the underground workers while being threatened with deportation if she tried to escape. Her tearful testimony to negotiators described a basement full of armed men speaking multiple languages, working around the clock producing synthetic drugs for international distribution. But Brenda had underestimated both Rosa's courage and Dexter's technical skills. While SWAT teams positioned themselves around the mansion, my son was busy turning Brenda's own security system against her. The thermal imaging sensors he'd placed throughout the tunnel network allowed him to create a real-time map of everyone inside the house. "She's got Rosa in the kitchen, but there are 3 other people in the basement," Dexter reported to Tactical Command. "And I can see at least 6 more people moving through the tunnels. They're trying to evacuate equipment through the underground network." The tunnel chase that followed looked like something from an action movie. FBI agents entered the underground network through multiple access points, following suspects who were frantically trying to destroy evidence and escape through passages that connected to the old railway system downtown. But Brenda's final gambit was both desperate and revealing. Unable to control the situation above ground, she attempted to flood the tunnel system to destroy evidence, regardless of the danger to her own accomplices still underground. The woman was willing to commit mass murder to protect her criminal empire. Rose's escape during the chaos was pure heroic cinema. While Brenda was distracted coordinating the evidence destruction, Rosa slipped out through the tunnel system she'd been forced to learn during months of captivity. She emerged 3 blocks away at the old subway entrance, immediately surrendering to federal agents and providing testimony that would seal Brenda's fate. The manhunt for Brenda ended not with dramatic shootouts or car chases, but with the kind of anticlimactic capture that real criminals usually experience. She was found hiding in a maintenance tunnel, soaking wet, covered in industrial chemicals, and clutching a waterproof bag containing fake passports and offshore bank account information. When they dragged her out of that tunnel in handcuffs, Brenda Thornfield, former HOA president, real estate fraud mastermind, and international drug trafficking coordinator, looked exactly like what she was, a pathetic criminal who'd finally run out of places to hide. The only question remaining was how many other neighborhoods across the country were hiding similar operations under their perfectly manicured lawns. The perp walk that ended Brenda Thornfield's criminal empire happened at rush hour in downtown's busiest subway station, with hundreds of commuters pulling out their phones to record the most satisfying arrest footage in local news history. She emerged from the maintenance tunnel looking like she'd been dragged through a sewer system, which technically she had. Her designer blazer was torn and stained with industrial chemicals that reeked like a combination of bleach and rotting fish. Her perfectly styled hair hung in wet strings around a face twisted with rage and disbelief. "This is illegal persecution," she screamed as federal agents hauled her up the subway stairs into the late afternoon sunlight. "I am a respected community leader being railroaded by deep state operatives and foreign hackers." The crowd of rush hour commuters formed an impromptu audience, their smartphones capturing every moment as Agent Olivia began reading the charges. The list was so long it sounded like a criminal justice textbook come to life. "Brenda Thornfield, you're under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, wire fraud, money laundering, kidnapping, attempted murder, filing false police reports, criminal harassment, utility theft, computer crimes, tax evasion, and violation of federal immigration laws." I stood in that crowd watching justice finally catch up to the woman who'd terrorized our neighborhood for months. The smell of diesel exhaust from city buses mixed with the metallic scent of subway air as dozens of news cameras rolled. Jenny Vasquez was there with her Channel 7 crew, but so were reporters from every major network who'd been following the story of suburban HOA abuse that uncovered international organized crime. "Marcus," Jenny called out, pushing through the crowd. "Any comment on Brenda's arrest?" This was my moment, the mic drop line I'd been rehearsing in my head for weeks. I looked straight into the cameras, then at Brenda, who was still ranting about government conspiracies while federal agents stuffed her into an unmarked sedan. All I did was name my Wi-Fi FBI surveillance van number 3 as a joke. Turns out, we actually needed FBI surveillance because our HOA president was running a multi-million-dollar drug trafficking operation through tunnels under our houses. Funny how these things work out. The crowd erupted in applause and laughter. Brenda's final scream of rage was cut off as the car door slammed shut, ending her reign of suburban terror forever. But the real satisfaction came from watching the community of Maplewood residents who'd gathered to witness her downfall. The Kowalskis stood arm in arm, having survived another form of tyranny. Mrs. Patterson clutched a folder of HOA financial records that would help prosecutors trace every stolen dollar. Mailman Pete high-fived neighbors he'd helped coordinate during the evacuation. Dexter stood beside me, laptop bag slung over his shoulder, looking proud but exhausted. The kid who'd started this whole thing with a teenager's Wi-Fi joke had ended up helping federal agents dismantle an international criminal conspiracy. "Dad," he said quietly as the news crews moved in for interviews, "think we can get back to normal HOA problems now? Like arguing about mailbox colors and grass height?" Agent Olivia approached us through the crowd, carrying a briefcase full of evidence that would keep federal prosecutors busy for years. Her smile was the kind that comes from knowing you've taken down genuinely bad people who were hurting innocent families. Mr. Pellegrino, we've arrested 17 people in connection with this operation across 3 states. The drug manufacturing equipment alone was producing approximately $5 million in synthetic opioids annually. The cryptocurrency mining operation was generating another $15 million in untraceable digital currency for organized crime syndicates. The numbers were staggering, but what hit me harder was thinking about all the families Brenda had driven from their homes to protect this criminal empire. How many single parents had given up fighting HOA harassment because they couldn't afford legal battles? How many elderly couples had sold their dream homes rather than face her systematic intimidation? What happens to the people she victimized, I asked. Complete restitution from seized assets, plus we're working with victim advocacy groups to provide support services. The Justice Department is also launching a national task force to investigate similar operations in other HOA-controlled communities. Rosa Martinez, the housekeeper who'd been essentially enslaved in Brenda's operation, stood nearby giving testimony to immigration attorneys who were fast-tracking her asylum application. Her courage in escaping and providing evidence had been crucial to the successful prosecution. The press conference that followed turned into an impromptu community celebration. Residents shared their stories of harassment and intimidation. Federal agents explained how the investigation had uncovered similar operations nationwide, and legal advocates announced new legislation to prevent HOA abuse. As the sun set over downtown, casting long shadows across the subway entrance where Brenda's criminal career had finally ended, I realized this story was bigger than one neighborhood's fight against a corrupt HOA president. We'd accidentally exposed a nationwide problem that was hurting families across America, and maybe, just maybe, our accidental war would help other communities fight back against their own suburban tyrants. 6 months later, walking through our neighborhood feels like stepping into a completely different world, one where the smell of fresh-baked cookies from community potlucks has replaced the stench of fear and corruption that once poisoned our streets. The transformation started with Brenda's foreclosed mansion. Instead of another McMansion, we voted to create Maplewood Community Garden, where Rosa Martinez now grows the herbs that remind her of home while studying criminal justice on her full scholarship. The sound of children's laughter echoes where drug manufacturing equipment once hummed in hidden basements. Our new HOA board, elected by actual residents instead of intimidation tactics, slashed monthly fees to $50 and instituted revolutionary policies like financial transparency and treating neighbors like human beings. When they offered me the presidency, I politely declined. I'd had enough suburban politics for several lifetimes, but I'm proud we created rotating leadership with term limits that prevent future dictators. Dexter's MIT acceptance letter came with a full scholarship and an invitation to guest lecture on digital forensics. His college essay, How I Helped the FBI Using Wi-Fi Jokes and Basic Cybersecurity, became legendary in admissions offices. The kid who started this mess with teenage humor now consults with federal agencies on cybercrime investigations. His HOA Watchdog app has been downloaded over 500,000 times, helping families document abuse and connect with legal resources. Congressional hearings on HOA reform legislation specifically cited his research on systematic harassment patterns. Not bad for someone who just wanted to make his neighbors laugh with internet jokes. The criminal justice was beautifully thorough. Brenda got 15 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to avoid death penalty charges. Her criminal network across 3 states received sentences totaling over 200 years combined. Most satisfying, every stolen dollar was recovered through asset forfeiture and returned to victims with interest, plus punitive damages. But the real victory was watching our community heal. The Kowalskis, who'd survived Nazi occupation, became symbols of resistance against suburban tyranny. Mrs. Patterson, once afraid to speak up about suspicious HOA expenses, now leads financial oversight committees. Mailman Pete got promoted to supervisor after his heroic coordination during the crisis earned commendations from the Postal Service. My relationship with Jenny Vasquez blossomed from professional alliance to something deeper. Taking down criminal conspiracies together builds strong foundations for romance. She won a Pulitzer for her investigative series, and her book The Wi-Fi Wars became a bestseller, being adapted for Netflix. Our wedding invitations will probably have Wi-Fi jokes. The ripple effects spread nationwide. Brenda's law now requires HOA financial audits in 18 states. Federal task forces discovered 23 other neighborhoods where organized crime had infiltrated community associations for money laundering and drug operations. Our accidental war sparked a nationwide movement protecting families from suburban terrorism. Personal healing took time, but therapy helped us understand that systematic harassment is psychological warfare designed to break spirits and steal homes. Recognizing Brenda's tactics as calculated criminal enterprise, not personal failings, made recovery possible. Dexter and I emerged stronger, closer, and absolutely committed to helping other families fight back. The practical lessons we learned could fill a handbook. Document everything with timestamps, know your legal rights under state HOA laws, build community alliances before you need them, and never underestimate the power of neighbors supporting each other against institutional bullies. Our annual Justice Day Festival raised $25,000 this year for legal aid organizations. Rosa Martinez gave the keynote speech about courage and community, speaking fluent English she'd mastered while earning her criminal justice degree. Seeing her transformation from terrified victim to confident advocate brought tears to eyes throughout the crowd. Every morning now, the crunch of gravel under my work boots sounds different, hopeful instead of anxious. The metallic scent of dew on my truck reminds me of victory mornings instead of harassment campaigns. Our Wi-Fi name, Still Not Afraid of Karens, gets chuckles from neighbors who understand that humor and solidarity defeated hatred and greed. The community garden's tomatoes taste like freedom. Children's playground laughter sounds like hope. And every family gathering in spaces once poisoned by criminal corruption proves that ordinary people can defeat extraordinary evil when they stand together. Sometimes the smallest acts of defiance, like naming your Wi-Fi as a joke, can expose the biggest conspiracies. Our suburban nightmare became everyone's victory because we refused to let bullies win. Drop a comment sharing your worst HOA nightmare. You might discover you're not alone in this fight. Hit subscribe to HOA Stories for more tales of ordinary families taking down suburban tyranny. Next week, how my insurance company tried to cancel me after a storm until they discovered I married a meteorologist.
From all of us here at HOA Stories, thanks so much for watching today's HOA Karen Meltdown. If you enjoyed seeing neighbors stand their ground and karma catch up, smash that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you won't miss the next HOA drama we bring you.